I titled our discussion this morning, Compassionate Listening, the Art of Listening and Being Heard. When teaching someone to swim, should you just throw them into the water and see what they do, let them figure it out? Or should we hold the person, making sure they know exactly how to do the stroke and kick before letting them go? The answer is somewhere in the middle. Technique is helpful, but sometimes you just need to figure out how to do things on your own. The same question can be asked about teaching a myriad of activities and skills. But I want to talk about how I was taught, or not really, as you'll see, the art and the skill of pastoral counseling, of listening to others when they're in time of need, in a time of pain. Today, I believe there is more teaching of this technique. But back in my day, those hoary days of the year 2000, I was given a list of patients at the beginning of the day and given 3 hours to visit 15 people. I think I failed because inevitably some patients were occupied with doctors or out of their room for procedures and tests. Others were asleep. And then you would go into a room and say, "My name is Daniel Schweber. Can we talk for a few minutes?" And inevitably you're going to get some no's. These people are in the hospital. They're feeling vulnerable, out of control. They get poked and prodded all the time. Who is this rabbinical student coming in, this stranger coming into my room? But some would say yes, like Mrs. Smith. "How are things going, Mrs. Smith?" "Not so good. I have cancer. I'm in pain. And I'm waiting for my son to bring this darn roast beef sandwich that I've been asking him for." This is where I began to sink, or at least flail. "I'm sorry you're in pain," I respond. "Are the doctors helping you?" "Not really. The pain medicine knocks me out, makes me constipated, and isn't curing my terminal cancer." "Do you want to talk about it, Mrs. Smith?" "No, thank you. I want to go to sleep. Have a good day, Rabbi." "Good day, Mrs. Smith." If this conversation happened at 9:15, I had until 1 o'clock after the lunch hour to tell the teachers about the incident. I only had a few more names on the list. What was I supposed to do with the rest of the time? I will admit, 21 years later, that I sometimes went out for a walk in the sunshine, annoyed at myself for having failed at the task. Then in the afternoon, we sat with the supervisor to share verbatims, where we're supposed to write down and share the script of our conversation. Some of my colleagues describe these 45 minutes, pour out your soul conversation. I was intimidated. I didn't have any of these. And unfortunately, there were so many students, the supervisors didn't seem to notice or want to help me. They said, "Don't worry, those long conversations will come. Keep trying." They threw me into the pool without giving me any techniques. It was a long 2 weeks. Yeah, I had a few longer conversations with some chatty people. Some were curious about Judaism, and if I got lucky, sports and baseball came up. In hindsight, the supervisors let me sink too much. I was not yet adept at compassionate listening. It would have been better to shadow someone for at least a few mornings. This program wasn't designed that day. It was a check the training box for graduation requirements for seminary students across New York City. I needed to be taught active listening. What is active listening? That is where you make a conscious effort to hear not only the words that another person says, but more importantly, the complete message being communicated, whether that is through words, through tone, body language, and many other verbal and mostly nonverbal cues and communications that people give. A person's response is also part of active listening. If I was using active listening with Mrs. Smith, I would have asked her about her son, the one that she was waiting for the darn roast beef sandwich. What is his name? Where does he live? Is he partnered? How often does he come? Each line in a dialogue is choose your own adventure book. I could have taken a risk and gotten curious about her pain. Is this pain all physical? Is there any spiritual pain? They can always say no. But if you cut off the conversation or ask these superficial questions, are the doctors helping you? Then they are not going to open up. Active listening is great for pastors, obviously. Our goal is to connect, to offer support and love. And yes, I have learned to does not always take 45 minutes. The patient needs to remain in charge. A pastor needs to skillfully speak and guide so the conversation remains about the patient and his or her needs. That's listening 102, how not to create transference. But active listening is good for all of us. Most conflicts, I think you know, begin because of miscommunication. People are not receiving, they're not hearing the complete message from each other. Active listening is good for us all. You probably guessed that I'm talking about listening this week because today's parsha we read, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel. God is ours. We have a relationship with God. God is unique, one. To declare God's uniqueness and oneness, the Torah could have used the more popular word, ro'eh, to see, to sense. It's in front of us. It's empirical. In many contexts, that would have worked better. See, Israel, look at the universe. All of this is from the one God. God took us out of Egypt. See, not necessarily hear. But the Torah shows Shema. Hear, listen. God is one. We have one God. And this makes sense if the Shema passage is addressing parents to their children, one generation to the next. The Shema is speaking to us. Listen to these words and repeat them. Do active listening. Hear the message of the Torah, pass it on, and repeat it. Because one of the biggest skills actually of active listening is to almost repeat what they said. It sounds trite, but it's real. Mrs. Smith, I hear that you are in pain and that you are waiting for the sandwich from your son. Tell me more. That shows that I have heard Mrs. Smith. And so that's why the Shema is telling us, V'shinantam levanecha. Repeat these words to our children. The Mishnah, our rabbis also knew about active listening in the classroom. Arba midot yoshvim lifnei chachamim, svog umishapech, mashmeret uvenafa. There are 4 types of students that sit before the rabbis in the lecture hall. A sponge, a funnel, a strainer, and a sieve. A sponge soaks up everything. A funnel takes in at one end and lets it all out at the other. A strainer which lets out the wine and keeps the lees or the dregs. A sieve lets out the coarse meal and retains the solet, the choice flour. Which is best, the sponge or the sieve? I think the sieve. Sponges absorb everything without discernment. They're not doing active listening. We know that sponges get stinky if you don't squeeze them out. A sieve, though, is active listening. discerning what the true message is. That is our goal. I have certainly come a long way from the summer of 2000. It is my intention and hope to actively listen to everyone I speak to here at Temple Israel and really in all of my interactions. If I were to summarize a good way to listen, it is to stay quiet, non-distracted, repeat what you hear, and remain curious. Ask questions. People usually like to talk. Happy listening, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.